Mr. President, your reaction to the story in The Atlantic that said that some of your top cabinet officials and aides had been discussing very sensitive material through Signal and included an Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that?
I don't know anything about it.
Today at Quantico Marine Base in Virginia, an unprecedented gathering of American military leaders who were summoned from across the country and the world for a quickly called meeting to hear from the Commander-in-Chief and his Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. Now, during his speech, President Trump said his administration would fight the, quote, enemy within and increase fitness within the ranks. But he also praised the military's might under his leadership. For more on this, let's bring in retired U.S. Army Major and military analyst Mike Lyons. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. There was an emphasis on improving the physical fitness of American troops in this address. Is this a legitimate concern for many in our military forces?
Hi, Elizabeth. I think this shift is long overdue, frankly, and normally it comes from the different services themselves. And it's the first time I've seen a Secretary of War make this kind of buck up, let's say. That's what we would call something like this. Usually the services kind of catch themselves, but I guess it's gone on for so long. But no, I welcome it. I think that to come back to the physical aspect of being in the military is very challenging now.
Breaking news that has the Pentagon in absolute chaos. Donald Trump's top national security advisors just leaked classified military strike plans to a journalist in what might be the most catastrophic security breach in modern American history. We're talking about actual war plans, targets, timing, and operational details being accidentally shared in an unsecured Signal group chat just hours before American forces launched strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen. In March 2025, someone in Trump's inner circle accidentally added The Atlantic's editor to a group chat where Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and other senior officials were discussing imminent military action. The journalist received these ultra-classified war plans just 2 hours before the strikes were set to begin, creating an unprecedented security crisis that has military leaders calling for immediate investigations and potential court-martials. The sheer incompetence and recklessness of discussing classified military operations on an unsecured messaging app has left Pentagon officials speechless and furious.
But now the standards, the physical fitness standards that were applied back then will be used today. And that's what he means by that. There was no female standard, for example, back in those combat units then. There'll be just one standard for each different MOS, which is the military occupational specialty. So that's what he was referring to. He's a little bit nuanced about it, and it wasn't about keeping women out of those jobs. If women can meet those standards, they'll be able to do those jobs. They'll still graduate from the military academies, for example, and go on. But the standard will be restored to what it was. There won't be two separate standards for the females, which frankly was lower than the male standards for the past few years.
But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, 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 or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage.
I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
having to do with what?
With some calling this the worst operational security failure they've ever witnessed. The fallout from this leak has been absolutely explosive, with service chiefs holding emergency meetings and Congress demanding immediate answers about how something this catastrophic could happen. Representative Adam Smith, the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, didn't mince words when he called this an appalling example of incompetence that threatens the lives of American service members. Think about what this means. Our enemies could have gotten advance warning of our military strikes because Trump's team was too careless or too arrogant to use secure communications. The fact that a journalist was accidentally included in these discussions shows a level of amateur-hour incompetence that would get any normal military officer immediately relieved of command and potentially court-martialed. But because this involves Trump's hand-picked loyalists, We're seeing the administration try to sweep it under the rug and pretend it's no big deal. What makes this security breach even more shocking is Trump's response when asked about it. He claimed he was hearing about it for the first time and tried to downplay the entire incident. This is either a stunning admission that the commander-in-chief doesn't know what his own national security team is doing, or it's yet another lie from someone who can't admit when his administration screws up. Either way, it reveals a terrifying lack of control and competence at the highest levels of American military command. Security experts and veterans are pointing out that using non-government apps for war planning doesn't just break federal policy, it potentially exposes our entire military strategy to foreign intelligence services who monitor these platforms. We could be talking about American soldiers being put in danger, operations being compromised, and national security being undermined, all because Trump's team couldn't be bothered to follow basic security protocols. Let's really examine how this catastrophic security breach happened and why it represents such a fundamental failure of leadership and competence. According to The Atlantic's reporting, their editor was somehow added to a Signal group chat where Trump's most senior national security officials were actively discussing classified military strike plans. We're not talking about general policy discussions or hypothetical scenarios. These were specific operational details about an imminent military action, including targets, timing, force composition, and tactical approaches. The fact that these officials were using Signal, a consumer messaging app, instead of classified government communication systems is a violation of every security protocol that exists. Military operations at this level are supposed to be discussed only on systems with the highest levels of encryption and security, in secure facilities, with strict controls on who has access to the information. The timeline of this disaster makes it even worse. The Atlantic's editor received these classified plans just 2 hours before the strikes were scheduled to begin. This means there was a window where foreign intelligence services, terrorist organizations, or enemy forces could have potentially gained access to this information and warned the targets or prepared countermeasures. American service members were literally about to go into harm's way. While their operational plans were floating around in an unsecured group chat, the Pentagon had to scramble to assess whether the operation had been compromised, whether to proceed with the strikes, and how to mitigate the potential damage from this leak. The fact that they went ahead with the strikes suggests they determined the information hadn't been widely compromised, but that's pure luck rather than good security practice. The response from military leadership has been one of barely contained fury and disbelief. Current and former military officers are describing this as the worst breach of operational security they've ever seen at this level of government. These are people who've spent their entire careers maintaining strict information security, following protocols and ensuring that classified information never leaks. And now they're watching political appointees treat war plans like they're planning a dinner party. The service chiefs reportedly held emergency meetings to discuss the implications of this breach and to implement new protocols to prevent it from happening again. There's talk of requiring all national security officials to undergo remedial training on information security, implementing stricter controls on personal devices, and potentially removing certain officials from the chain of command for sensitive operations. The congressional response has been swift and bipartisan, with lawmakers from both parties expressing shock and demanding accountability. Democrats are using this as evidence that Trump's administration is dangerously incompetent and cannot be trusted with national security. Republicans are in a difficult position. They want to support the military and national security, but they don't want to criticize Trump too harshly. Some GOP lawmakers are trying to deflect by saying we should focus on the military operation itself rather than how the information was handled. But that's becoming an increasingly untenable position as more details emerge about just how badly this was mishandled. There are already calls for formal congressional hearings, subpoenas for everyone involved in the group chat, and new legislation to prevent this kind of breach from happening again. The broader implications of this security breach extend far beyond just one leaked military operation. This is about the fundamental competence and trustworthiness of the Trump administration when it comes to protecting America's most sensitive secrets. If they can't even keep war plans secure, what else are they mishandling? What other classified information is being discussed on unsecured channels? How many other operations have been potentially compromised that we don't even know about? Intelligence professionals are warning that foreign adversaries like Russia, China, and Iran are absolutely exploiting these security failures, potentially gaining access to classified information that would normally take years of espionage to obtain. The damage to America's intelligence relationships with allies could be catastrophic. Why would other countries share sensitive information with us if we can't even keep our own secrets secure? The use of Signal for discussing classified military operations reveals a deeper problem within the Trump administration, a casual disregard for rules, protocols, and professional standards that exists throughout the organization. This isn't just about one mistake or one bad decision. It's about a culture where loyalty to Trump matters more than competence, where following the rules is seen as optional, and where the normal safeguards that protect national security are viewed as bureaucratic obstacles to be circumvented. When you have Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who has minimal national security experience beyond being a Fox News host, making decisions about military operations, this is the kind of disaster you get. The administration has prioritized political loyalty over professional expertise, and now we're seeing the dangerous real-world consequences of that approach. The fact that a journalist was accidentally added to this classified discussion raises serious questions about basic competence and attention to detail. How does someone accidentally add an outside party to a group chat discussing classified military operations? Were they not checking who was in the group? Were they so casual about operational security that they didn't even notice? Or worse, was this not actually an accident, but a deliberate leak disguised as incompetence? The Atlantic's editor, to their credit, immediately recognized the sensitivity of what they were seeing and handled it responsibly. But what if it had been a foreign agent or someone with malicious intent who received this information? We could be looking at American casualties, failed operations, and strategic disasters. The technological aspect of this breach deserves special attention because it highlights how the Trump administration has failed to adapt to modern security challenges. Signal is a perfectly fine app for personal communications, but it's absolutely not appropriate for classified government business. The government has spent billions of dollars developing secure communication systems specifically designed to protect classified information, yet Trump's team chose to use a consumer app that could be compromised by foreign intelligence services. This suggests either stunning ignorance about basic cybersecurity or deliberate circumvention of security protocols, neither of which is acceptable for officials handling life and death military decisions. Looking at the international ramifications, this security breach has likely damaged America's credibility with allies and emboldened our enemies. Intelligence sharing between nations relies on trust that shared information will be properly protected. When allied nations see American officials casually discussing war plans on unsecured apps, they're going to think twice before sharing their own sensitive intelligence with us. This could have long-term consequences for American national security, limiting our ability to gather intelligence, coordinate operations, and respond to threats. Meanwhile, our adversaries are probably laughing at our incompetence while eagerly exploiting these security failures to gain advantages. The political consequences of this scandal are still unfolding, but they could be severe for Trump and his administration. This plays directly into concerns about Trump's fitness for office and his ability to handle the responsibilities of commander-in-chief. How can someone who can't even ensure basic operational security be trusted with nuclear codes and military decision-making? Democrats are already incorporating this scandal into their broader narrative about Trump's incompetence and danger to national security. Even some Republicans are finding it hard to defend this level of negligence, especially those with military backgrounds who understand how serious these security breaches are. The response from the veteran community has been particularly harsh, with many expressing outrage that their brothers and sisters in arms were put at risk by this incompetence. Veterans understand that operational security isn't just bureaucratic protocol, it's literally life and death. When war plans leak, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines die. The fact that Trump's team was so cavalier with information that could get service members killed is seen as a fundamental betrayal of the commander-in-chief's responsibility to protect the troops. Veterans organizations are calling for accountability, and some are even suggesting that officials involved should face criminal charges for mishandling classified information. As we look at potential reforms and responses to prevent future breaches, several proposals are gaining traction. There's talk of legislation requiring all national security communications to occur only on government-approved secure systems, with criminal penalties for violations. Some are calling for mandatory security clearance reviews for anyone involved in this breach, potentially resulting in revocations that would end careers. Others want broader reforms to how political appointees are vetted and trained before being given access to classified information. The military is reportedly implementing its own reforms, including potentially excluding certain political appointees from operational planning to prevent future compromises. The ultimate question this scandal raises is whether America can afford to have leaders who treat national security with such casual incompetence. This isn't a partisan issue. It's about the basic ability to protect American lives and interests. When war plans are being shared like grocery lists, when classified operations are discussed on apps that teenagers use, when the commander-in-chief claims ignorance about his own administration's security failures, we have a crisis that goes beyond politics. This is about whether America can function as a serious military power when its leadership treats security protocols as optional suggestions rather than vital requirements. The answer to that question will determine not just Trump's political future, but America's standing in the world and our ability to protect ourselves and our allies in an increasingly dangerous world.